Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Well, hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Julie Fraguia, and I'm the head of marketing for Instant Info Systems. And on behalf of the whole Instant Info Systems team, we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here. So we're really excited today to have industry leader Trustwave join us. Steve Baer, Trustwave's Field Chief Technology Officer, has a great presentation on deck, focused on how companies can better protect themselves from a cyber attack and what to do if one happens, even if you don't have a large team dedicated to security. Before we begin, I want to just cover off on a little bit of housekeeping. You should see on your screen the GoToWebinar control panel. So at any time in the presentation, feel free to type your question into the questions box, and we'll try to answer those as we go along. And if for some reason we don't have a chance to get to your question, don't worry, we will certainly reach out to you directly and make sure you get the information that you are looking for. So real quick, our agenda today, we'll do just some very brief introductions at the beginning, talk about the survey questions that we asked you. We'll show you how you all responded. And then I'm going to turn it over to Steve. He's going to talk about the ripple effect and the current state of the global marketplace and why managed threat detection and response is so important. And at the end, we will have some time for additional questions. Really quick, I just wanted to say again, thanks for being here, and everyone who attends today will be entered to win an Amazon gift card worth $100. So stay tuned for that. Our winner will be selected and notified at the end of tomorrow's presentation. So really quickly about Instant Info Systems, just a brief overview. So who are we? For nearly 30 years, IIS has been providing technology solutions and services to companies of all sizes and just about every industry. So you can see a brief look at some of our notable customers. We've been a trusted advisor to some of the largest organizations in nearly every industry. And we have focused really on helping organizations manage their voice, fax, and data infrastructures, and in the last 10 years or so, really helping these organizations move those infrastructures into the cloud. But whether we're talking about UCaaS or CCaaS or fax, in almost every conversation, security is the prevailing concern. So that's why we're really excited to have Trustwave here. So we are a trusted advisor, and that means our goal is to find the best solution to meet your unique needs. And because we are a vendor neutral partner, we have access to the industry's leading providers and best of breed solutions. So again, that's why we have Trustwave here with us today. I'm sure you've seen the statistics around security. More than 67% of companies have been the subject of a ransomware attack, and more than half of these start with phishing, with a phishing email to an employee. And so at the end of the year, this is costing companies more than $6 trillion. So this is a big problem. And we asked you what your biggest security challenges were when you registered, and here's what you told us. The overwhelming majority answered a lack of cybersecurity expertise within your organization is your biggest concern, followed closely by insufficient technology and automation and not having enough staff and resources to manage this very important task. So again, very excited to welcome Steve Baer, Field CTO of Trustwave today. So Steve, or Baer as his friends call him, has been in the information security industry for over 20 years. He started out in banking and e-commerce and then moved on to specialized technologies at RSA, Trustwave, and Dell SecureWorks. So Baer was most recently the Director of Security Architects at Security Architects for the Americas for Dell SecureWorks, where he directly managed 82 security architects across all the sales market segments. And prior to that, he was VP, Global Director of Systems Engineers at Trustwave. He's also played a pivotal leadership role as virtual CISOs. He's an active participant in InfraGard, the Chicago FBI Citizens Academy, and on to the steering committee for the U.S. Secret Service Chicago Electronic Crimes Task Force. So to say that we have a subject matter expert with us today is a grave understatement. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over, because nobody came here to listen to me, and I'm going to give it over to you, Steve, and let you take it from here.
All right, excellent.
Here we go. Hold on. Just handing it over.
Okay, you guys see my presentation?
Brilliant. Yep. Just pop that into presentation mode.
Okay, just bear with me for a second.
There we go. Beautiful. Look
All
at
right,
us.
excellent. There we go.
Technology at its best.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what Spider Labs does, and give you an idea of why we're some of the industry's experts in cybercrime. All right, to start with. So, every day at Trustwave, we analyze a lot of different threat vectors. We do digital forensic and incident response. We teach digital forensics and incident response to a number of law enforcement agencies around the globe. And in that, we understand the who and the what of cybercrime. We do a lot of investigation, a lot of deep dive and intelligence gathering, and so we're able to glean a lot of the who and the what and the how behind threat actors, the tactics they're using, some of the things we're seeing in the wild, and head them off before they become major threats for our clients. Every time we're out doing a breach investigation, and we do about 1,900 of them a year, all of that threat intelligence comes back and feeds our operation, so that globally we can respond accordingly for our clients. And so as organizations have that global footprint, or as we see cybercrime unveil itself in the global ecosystem, we're able to pull all that intelligence, all that threat telemetry, if you will, back into our infrastructure so that we're monitoring and managing technologies for clients. They're getting all of that richness of data to make that technology work even more effective for them. And so we continue to delight the analysts and impress our clients and move up into the right in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Okay. We do that with our operations folks, and we separate them out into tiers, as you can see here, so that they're giving the best possible service to our clients. And some things are simply just the things that go bump in the night, and you need someone to kill a process or quarantine a host, or provide a little context and color around what the actual issue is, all the way down into like our tier 3 people that take things apart and figure out, is that a targeted new piece of malware? Is that a new piece of ransomware? Is that a new something that we've never seen before? And how do we build countermeasures, or how do we defend against that kind of stuff? So InfoSec, we say things like we've got to be right all the time, and this is how we get there, by having a robust team of people around the globe that work in concert together. And most organizations quite simply can't build this type of program. It's expensive, right? When you look around an organization, oftentimes the mature functions that need to happen inside an organization on the security side of things, it's usually one person. And it simply looks like this. Map out, create a grid map of all the things that need to happen inside that organization, inside your company, right? And whether that's antivirus scanning or firewall patching, incident response, threat intelligence, start to put names into those boxes, right? And what invariably will happen is what I call the Jimmy scenario, right? Well, Jimmy does this one, and Jimmy does that. Jimmy does my incident response, right? Jimmy is my domain admin, my firewall admin. Jimmy also handles all of my installs, desktops, printer issues, you name it. Well, suddenly if Jimmy got hit by a bus or won the lottery, let's wish him the best, he wins the lottery, there goes your cyber program out the door, right? And so SOC work is not that glamorous, and in IT security, there's almost zero unemployment. So people are getting lured away, and quite honestly, they're coming to work for companies like us to learn their skills and advance through programs like this. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what happens in cybercrime and sort of what I call the ripple effect, right? Because you're not going to have a one-day event, right? We're also going to talk a little bit about the underground threat economy and how things just become the pervasive beasts that they are today, right? So let's start with some ransomware statistics, right? Ransomware is top of mind or front of the house. It's on the front page of every publication you look at, right? And so almost every week you see somebody in the journal, right, paying $50 million for this, 40 million for that, right? It's getting more and more expensive. Well, the average small business pays about 1.85 million, all said and done, right? What's also really alarming is about 80% of organizations that get hit again, right? It gets out there that you pay, right? And then somebody else's, and people will buy and sell those lists of their targets that paid, right? And if you didn't show up your defenses, you're going to get hit again, right? What's also interesting is the average downtime 21 days, some more, some less, depending on what it is, right? 11 seconds, right, to get hacked, right, to get hit, right? It doesn't take very long. People still click on things, as you're well aware, right? There's some really interesting avenues on how the intruder gets in, right? What they go after. You can bet that they live off the land for a while, but remote desktop compromise and phishing still really viable entry methods, right? And then think about SolarWinds for one quick example, right? From a software vulnerability perspective. SolarWinds was live in the wild for 9 months, before it was disclosed, right? It was probably another 11 months before a lot of organizations were really wrapping their hands around the countermeasures and prevention mechanisms. So it's a problem that's not going to go away, okay? Conversely, when an organization gets compromised, right, they have a lot of lingering costs. And so when companies say it's cybersecurity is expensive, I'm going to take my chances, or I just have cyber insurance to deal with these things, understand really what's going to happen, right? Not necessarily on day one, but day 1 through 30. There's a lot of incurred costs there, right? Do you pay the ransom? Do you not pay the ransom? Is it legal to do it where you're at? Is it do you have somebody to do that? You usually have to hire a third-party firm to do the Bitcoin transaction, because most organizations weren't really ready to do that. Okay. And typically you want to hire someone that has some business acumen and can negotiate that fee down, right? Because you can bet that, say, CNA Insurance, this is public data, right? CNA Insurance paid supposedly $50 million on their ransom. I'll bet you the bad guy probably asked for 200 million, and they negotiated that down, right? Conversely, we also see reports of the bad guy saying, you hire somebody to try and negotiate down with us, right? We throw away the key and you never get it back. So, there's a lot of data out there to make informed decisions, but you really need to make some informed decisions. Okay.
Hey, Steve, can I interject for a second?
Yes, please.
So we have a question that came in regarding cyber insurance and how, a service like Trustwave, how does that work with cyber insurance? If the question is, if I have cyber insurance, why do I need an additional service provider? So maybe you can elaborate on
Certainly. Yeah, thanks for asking.
where those gaps are. Yeah.
Absolutely. So cyber insurance doesn't necessarily cover everything, right? And so cyber insurance will almost always cover things like gear, right? So if Secret Service or FBI showed up and they confiscated some of your infrastructure, right? Your router, firewalls, what have you. Well, you're not getting it back anytime soon, right? And usually cyber insurance will cover gear, right? It won't pay for things like consulting, right? So you need to have an expert to come in and remediate an issue and help you get past that. More often than not, most of those cyber insurance programs don't cover that. It does not cover fines, lawsuits, or any of those other things, right? And so, um, when it's all said and done, when you move out those, say, that ripple effect to days, 365, when you're paying for all the lawsuits that add up, or a lawsuit that may add up, or conversely, if you're paying for things like credit protection, right? The average cost on credit protection is about $8 per user per year, right? And so, if depending on how many users are in your database or how many users are in your environment, when the compromise happens, that could be pretty expensive to organizations, right? Cyber insurance usually doesn't pay that, right? The cyber insurance also doesn't pay for things like, maybe in the e-commerce world, credit card reissuance, right? So today, to get one of the new credit cards we're using with the chip, right? Chip pin cards cost about $22 to distribute out to the end user, all said and done, right? So third parties will like stack up against an organization that's been compromised to try and recoup some of that cost. Okay. And so cyber insurance, like I like to say, that umbrella policy may leave you feeling a little bit wet, right? The other things that need to happen, during that breach as well, is your cleanup efforts and your fines and all those things that are happening. Cyber insurance generally doesn't pay for those things either, right? And so sit down, have a really hard look at your policy, have a really hard discussion with your cyber insurance company about what's really required. Conversely, most cyber insurance companies are now coming back to their clientele saying, we want like a rule of thumb or a measure of due diligence that you do have some type of cyber resiliency program in place, right? Are you having the necessary tests done to make sure that you can you're not as easily compromised, if that makes sense? Okay. And so some real world examples of this are things like municipalities, right? And so City of Atlanta gets hit with ransomware. Okay. Uh, they paid a ransom fine of about $56,000, and again, negotiated down, right? Paid it in Bitcoin, completely untraceable, right? By the time they got through all their ripples here, I think they were on the hook for around $16 million for full recovery, right? So things that needed to be replaced, re-image, restitution, damages, you name it, it gets expensive fast. City of Baltimore, about a year later, very similar scenario. They paid $76,000 in their ransom, right? Their tail of the tape came out to about 17 million bucks, right? So now think about things like the Colonial Pipeline, think about CNA Insurance, where they were 40, $50 million. What's that ripple going to look like when it finally like ebbs out all the way for them? Okay.
So I think the key message here is, a service like Trustwave, it's not so much about filling the gaps of what cyber insurance doesn't cover. It's about prevention, right? It's about,
Yeah.
let's make sure this doesn't happen to begin with. An ounce
It's
of, what is it? An ounce of prevention's worth, in this
pounds of
case,
pain,
$6
right?
trillion in cure.
Yeah, there's a little bit of prevention goes a long way, right? And you
Right,
don't need
right.
Fort Knox level security, right? But you need to know where your risk is or how bad your bleeding is, right? You don't have to boil the ocean, right? You don't have to encrypt and double and triple and secret everything. But understand really why you're a target as well, right? And how easily you're compromised. And I think that helps you make some really informed decisions along that road. Okay.
Right, exactly.
But let's unpack that a little bit and talk about cybercrime in and of itself. And this is a big business. This is this is a problem that's not going to go away, because if you take someone with, a high degree of technical acumen, okay, and they find a vulnerability, they find a flaw, right? If they're good corporate citizens, they disclose that, right? They go to Microsoft and say, hey, I found this, right? You guys should fix it. And they get a free copy of Windows and a t-shirt, and off to their, off on their merry way they go. Well, the reality is it doesn't happen that way. They find the flaw, they sell it to maybe a vulnerability broker, or they create a tool or a kit to work through that compromise, to work through that flaw, to exploit that flaw, right? And then they sell it, right? And they'll sell it to people for 50, 60 bucks, right? And it doesn't come out of your pocket to begin with. It comes from your other ill-gotten gains, right? And then those are the things that we see plague a lot of organizations today. And ransomware is just another example of that. I mean, there are flavors upon flavors of that stuff, right? And so you also have to remember that, in the cyber world, right, in cybersecurity, our attackers are generally not here in the States, and they're almost will never ever see prosecution. I mean, the odds are like probably have better odds of winning the lottery than have someone get caught and serve time for be prosecuted for cybercrime. Okay, so it's not illegal from where they're operating from, right? It's probably even encouraged in some cases, depending on the nation state that's behind that individual, right? And they may work for somebody during the day and do cyber, hacking at night. That's definitely in the realm of possibilities, right? And so the return on the investment is incredibly too high. So start with, in the world of ransomware, you can start with 50, 60 bucks, right? Then you can go rent some services, because why build stuff when you can go rent it? So I want to rent a phishing attack service, an email compromising service, an RDP compromising service, right? That doesn't cost a lot either. That's like $200 or $300, right? So maybe less than $300-400. First ransom, if I hit someone for $10,000 and someone pays it just to get it to go away, it's a really nice return on investment. And by the way, I did it all sitting on my couch, right? There are a ton of tools and technologies that are really built like a big business, right? With release schedules and updates and all the other things that you need to evade the countermeasures for the technologies that we use to shut that kind of stuff down, that is just available at their fingertips. And then, like I said, it's run like a business, and it's not going to go away. And we can joke all along about, you just shouldn't click on stuff. The reality is things are so sophisticated that you will always find the weakest link. You will always find that hole that they will exploit, right? It's running down the halls, twisting the doorknobs. Things get better and better and better in terms of their tradecraft. It's no longer that email with English that's a little off, right? Spellings that are done or logos that are a little compromised. They'll compromise the actual end user and send a very legit, well-crafted email that has just, a spreadsheet file in there that looks absolutely legit, something you should be doing day in and day out anyway, right? And compromise happens, right? And so it's going to happen. Right? So we try to help with that, right? And we can meet clients at wherever they stand, is what we like to say, right? And sometimes you just need advisory services. Sometimes you just need help on getting my arms around things. Sometimes you need monitoring and management of your given technologies. Sometimes you need that full suite of managed detection and response, kill a foreign process, kill an offending host, right? Quarantine devices, move through things smartly. But we can do it all, and we can move as clients are ready to move. Okay. And so, as cyber professionals, we need to be right all the time, right? And this gives us the ability with all these different services to help clients move along that journey. And again, you can't start, immediately at 60, but get smarter around the assets in your organization, the businesses that you run, why you're targeted, and then make informed security decisions for your organization. We do that through our Fusion platform, right? It's sort of that glue that allows us to monitor and manage over 800 different technologies today. If it adds a log, if it's off the shelf, available hardware or software, we're parsing it already. Okay. If it's a homegrown application, it requires a little bit of work for us. But this is the platform that our analysts use to do threat operations, right? To make the difference between a micro threat and a major threat. Okay. And we can deliver our services down through the web, through a mobile app. So it's very easy to communicate with us, right? So that makes a difference in today's technological age where this is how I want to be contacted. These are the things that I need to have from an update perspective. Okay. And it doesn't matter where you're at infrastructure wise. And most organizations are not a single cloud infrastructure any longer. I mean, everyone is multi-cloud when it comes down to it, right? But again, if it's from the cloud to the network to the endpoint, we can monitor and manage it all, right? If there's a log source, we can pull it in and make security sense of it. Okay.
Hey, Steve, we've got another
Yes.
question that just came in.
Yeah, please.
I think related to this last slide. My IT service provider says they provide me with security. So how do I know that they are protecting me? And how do I know if I need additional help?
Right. So that goes with what we're about to talk about in these pillar services as well. But you really test them, right? I mean, we work in this area of people, process, and technology in concert, defending our infrastructures. Okay, and whether they're in the cloud or in a hosted data center in your own prem, doesn't matter, right? So who watches the watchers? How do you trust but verify those things, right? And so I'm a big advocate of test everything, test as much as you can. So we put together programs for organizations to really get their arms around security testing and making informed decisions. So for example, a proactive threat hunt. You want to know if there's an adversary already in your environment before before you're going to do something like a merger and acquisition, before you're going to chain networks together, before you're making a major technology implementation, right? You want to make sure that there's not already a bad guy in there lingering under the covers, doing the things that they do, just waiting for his moment, right? Or from a security test perspective, how do I test my application, my network, my web infrastructure from the outside coming in, right? And back to people, process, and technology. Organizations make a capital investment into that. How resilient is it from a compromised vectors perspective, right? How easily is it hacked, right? From a scorecard perspective, does that mean like, some kids watching some YouTube videos can do it, or a sophisticated bad guy does it, right? And so those are two services, that proactive threat hunt and security testing, that we put together for organizations that just simply don't know where to start, right? Don't break out the band-aids till you know how bad the bleeding is, of course, right? But these are great services to get your arms around what's happening in your world, right? How easily are things compromised, or maybe not, right? Maybe you're maybe you're, defending your infrastructure to the best you can. But the reality is most of the time organizations would rather have these types of services, which are really not all that expensive, right? Than have to pay for, that downstream ripple effect of a compromise. Okay. So then we have incident response retainer. Who do you call, right? Who do you call that when things are sideways? When you just had a visit from your bank, or God forbid, law enforcement agency saying you're part of a compromise, right? So understand, what all that means. How do I get it cleaned up? How do I get things remediated? We often hear organizations say, "I've got a retainer. It came with my cyber insurance." Well, it probably is with, one of the big five or so, right? Like say a Deloitte or someone like that. And so if there's a major cyber incident, right, retainer or not, you're waiting in that queue. So I always tell people to get a backup on a retainer. Okay. And so it's a nice position to be in. Okay. And then we have ransomware readiness, because ransomware is not going away, like we talked about, right? And you hear about it every day. So how do you prepare for that inevitable, right? So as an exercise, how do I get smarter around responding to a cyber threat that I will more than likely see, right? Or conversely, maybe one of my business partners will see, and I need to be I need to be as aware as possible, make some really informed decisions. So our ransomware readiness program comes with incident response retainers to help organizations get smarter around making some of those really monumental but awkward security-related decisions. Okay. And I think all of these services to help organizations really wrap their arms around perhaps why they're targeted, right? And understand that from a cyber bad guy perspective, they'll really want to monetize everything, okay? The bad guys will look at infrastructure and say, that's a school district, right? It doesn't really have a lot of what we call personally identifiable information or intellectual property, right? But they have thousands of end computers, right? Thousands of workstations, laptops, you name it, that can be used in a bot network to do something bad to someone else. They've got a tremendous amount of bandwidth that could be used to do something bad. That can be used in the next denial of service attack, right? But even that small merchant that has, a small website, does a good modicum of business, right? The bad guy looks at that infrastructure and says, there's a web commerce, e-commerce infrastructure there that I can compromise, put my hidden website in there to do or sell, so I can sell whatever illicit content I have. So infrastructure gets compromised for a number of different reasons, and the motivations will vary depending on the bad guy, right? Some of it sometimes it's just they'll compromise something just so they have a place off the radar, so to speak, to stash their other stolen data, right? And we've seen that happen, right? And so, it's not always done in a paste bin or dumped somewhere online and, like hope nobody finds it. They'll compromise someone's infrastructure and leave it in there for safekeeping while they go and do, more compromises. So all of this really helps organizations get smarter around, why they're targeted and the like.
Do you see, Steve, in your experience, do you see in terms of the types of companies that get targeted? I know we hear a lot from companies who say, well, I'm so small, why would anybody come after me? How do you respond? Obviously everybody's a target, as you just explained, but kind of how do you further rationale small organizations and their need to protect themselves as much as a large organization?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So, there are a couple of things to think about here, right? That relatively small infrastructure does not mean small potential when it comes to cybercrime, right? You could be strategically in a supply chain that services something else, right? And that's the target. You are just the weak link, right? Or think of it as running down the halls and twisting the doorknobs. Yours was the one or that small company was the one that was easily opened, right? And then they're going to move laterally through that ecosystem to get to a different target, right? Some cases it's purely exploratory, right? And it's just an opportunistic attack. It's no different from walking around late at night waiting to get stuck, to get mugged, right? And so some of that is there, right? Versus sometimes organizations deal with sensitive information, intellectual property, those trade secret things that bad guys want. But I always think about smaller organizations as well is it's almost like a little bit of a training ground too. That's where cyber criminals will hone their craft, right? Because let's face it, going up against Bank One and some of these other JP Morgan Chase type of infrastructures, a little daunting, right? They've got a lot of cyber. They've got 80 some professionals on staff all the time looking for bad things, right? And they're buying the best of the most recent technologies and countermeasures. The little guys aren't, right? And so if I can compromise 3 or 4 of them, well, now I can turn that into something else, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity out there, and like I said, they'll find a way to monetize all that stuff, right? They'll look at your business and they'll come up with a ransomware around that as well. And so, or they'll probably bleed that out and use it for a handful of other cyber attacks or tradecraft or other things before they actually hit you with the ransom. We call that the modularity effect. And so if you think of a freight train, right? That train pulls into that organization and there's 80 some cars on it. They're going to start unpacking the ones that are, the most lucrative for them, which could be attacking other organizations, and they'll wait to do your attack, attack you, so to speak, at the end. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Thank you for that. I'm sitting here monitoring our questions as they come in, and I want to make sure we get through all of them. And this one, I think, is probably one that everyone on the call is thinking. Security is really complex. Where do I even start? And I think that's a great foundational. If someone leaves this presentation today, where do they even start to think about improving their security
Yeah, test.
posture? Yeah.
Test, right? That proactive threat hunt test or that security test, you either test from your inside out or your outside in, right? Get your arms around that. And those are realistic tests, right? And what I tell people a lot of times is don't get lured into that false sense of security in this really lightweight feel good test, right? Like network mapping and vulnerability scans are feel good tests, right? That's not really how organizations necessarily get compromised, right? And so test the way a bad guy would, test depth, right? And so, like I said earlier, you don't have to be Fort Knox, right? But you at least have to have some layered security and some smarter approaches to how you handle your data, how you handle your infrastructure. So it's a little bit harder to get compromised, and then you'll move away from all those opportunistic type attacks, right?
So
And it's
when you
also, go ahead.
No, when you say test, can you elaborate on specifically what that means?
So,
And specifically, what can organizations do internally, or is that something that Trustwave can help them with?
so Trustwave can help them with that proactive threat hunt, right? And that security test from the outside in, right? And so let's test your application. Let's test your web infrastructure. Let's test your network infrastructure to see how resilient it is, whether you're watching it or you have a third party watching it. Okay. And then that proactive threat hunt, that's a test where we drop inside your organization and we look for that adversarial activity. We look for the bad guy that's gone native and is using your systems and your controls against you, right? Usually to do something else, but also to protect your infrastructure, and then get rid of that adversary before a major breach happens.
Got it.
Okay.
Another question just came in. We get alerts and respond when we can. So why would we need a provider to give me more monitoring than we have?
Yeah. So efficacy of alerts is really big, right? Do you get alerts because the system is up or down, right? Or do you get alerts because there's already some compromise going on? And if you respond when you can, you quite simply don't have the people that should be doing what they should be doing, right? So look at services, in our case, what we call managed detection and response, that do outcome-based things, right? Like if we have to wait for Jimmy to respond at 3 o'clock in the morning to kill a process, that's not really the best use of your time and money and energy, right? It's best used when you have us kill a process at 3 o'clock in the morning and Jimmy looks at a report at 8 a.m.
Did we lose you, Steve? Are you there?
No, no,
Okay.
that was it. I
It
just
went quiet all of a sudden.
hanging participle, right? So, you
Well,
should.
in our conversations earlier today too, I really like your example of, in addition to Jimmy managing these security interests, Jimmy's also managing a whole bunch of other things in the
Well,
organization. So,
where are his priorities, right? And so,
right, right.
and the Jimmies will come and go, right? And so, why, why hinge your infrastructure upon one or two individuals that probably could get lured away, right? Or probably will move on in their own career paths anyway. And quite honestly, they're really not security experts in the grand scheme of things.
Right, right. We do talk to a lot of organizations where, the IT director, the IT decision maker is responsible for so many things within the organization in addition to security. And so, they're expected to have this depth of expertise around security and protecting their organization, as well as all the other applications and infrastructures that they need to keep running
Absolutely,
24/7.
everything's up and running.
Yeah,
I think we're okay. I think
right,
we're safe. I
right.
don't think I don't think we got hit this week. Well, I mean,
I don't think,
that's not a comfortable feeling, right? And
right.
so, as we've seen cybercrime evolve, right? I mean, that's really and truly how organizations, enterprise class organizations, were really operating for the longest time before, we had some of the best EDR and MDR type technologies out there, right? And
Hmm.
organizations will think, well, I got a firewall, I'm good. No, you have a technology that controls IPs and ports, and not necessarily what goes in and out of those IPs and ports,
Hmm.
right? Or
Hmm.
I'm encrypting my traffic, I'm good. You're encrypting a tunnel for bad guys to do bad things to you. So
Yeah. Um, okay, so I'm looking at the time. We are almost at the 45 past the hour mark, and I'm sure everybody would appreciate a little extra time in their day out of this hour. So I want to conclude with one more question that just came in, and that is regarding cost. And this person asked, security services are too expensive. What is the ROI in this investment? And I think too, when we talk to organizations, especially small to mid-sized companies, obviously cost is a key factor. And what would you say to an organization who thinks that a service like this is too expensive or outside of their budget?
I think
And
organizations,
maybe you can elaborate also on how does the pricing work with a service like this? You talk about the incident response retainer here. Um, yeah, maybe you can just elaborate on that.
sure. So most organizations are already buying a lot of technology and software and that type of stuff today, hardware and software, right? Is it the most ideal hardware and software purchasing that they should be making, right? Or conversely, do they buy something and say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Well, the reality is when you look at um, a lot of technology out there, right? You may have what I would like to call the IT lemon list, right? You probably have technology, infrastructure, hardware, software that's off of support, right? You've had it for 5 years. Most support agreements end after 2 or 3, right? Unless you're paying maintenance, but the hardware is evolving, so it's planned obsolescence in our world, right? So the firewall vendor wants you to buy the next model, and 2 or 3 years later, and if you're still using the other one, there's no supported releases, which include security fixes and updates and patches and so forth, right? Um, so you have number one, you have what the IT lemon list. So you need to be smart about the technology that's in your organization, hardware and software, whether it's up to date, whether it's got patches, it has security fixes, and it's really protecting your organization. Okay, number one. Number two, you also have to look at the return on investment for those technology spends, right? Now I say things like spend your money wisely, right? Look at tools like do more with what you have tools. You can buy an MDR, managed detection and response service, right? That includes the endpoint protection with things like your antivirus and incident response and all these other services that are all bundled into one versus piecemealing things or the other things around your organization that cost you money. So, for example, like what are you paying for antivirus, right? That is not what we would call next gen antivirus, that is not protecting your organization. And by the way, it's signature based updating. So, the next attack vector probably has uh, about 4 months of target time for you, right? So you're waiting for a signature to be developed, tested, um, released and then for your people to pick it up, test it, and deploy it into your infrastructure, the bad guy has about a 4-month window before you actually get all that done. Okay. And even when you have auto updates turned on, believe me, okay, to do bad things, to compromise that vulnerability, to sell, that trade craft that somebody else is going to buy and use against you. So look at infrastructure, look at technologies that do multiple things in a smart fashion, right? Do more with what you have, tools, and then remove those things in your infrastructure, quite honestly, that aren't as functional. Like, legacy antivirus, I would throw out the window. It's probably less than 20% effective anyway. So hire some security professionals. We're happy to do consulting engagements with organizations to make informed decisions around cyber security resiliency, right? But then do those proactive threat hunts, do that security test, right? It will make a difference in making those informed decisions. And every time you do those, by the way, you walk away, you don't walk away with a test and a grade going, I got a B in math. You got a roadmap, right? And you got a plan to fix your issues and to remediate your problems, right? And get smarter around the right countermeasures that will fit your business. Is that helpful?
That's very helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you. I know our audience appreciates it too. I think we're going to wrap up here a few minutes early. Steve, I really appreciate you taking time to be with us today. I know our audience really appreciates this. And I think, based on the conversations I know we're having with our customers, and based on the questions and comments we've received today regarding this presentation, I know there's going to be quite a bit of follow-up. So I really appreciate you being here today and sharing your expertise with us and our audience. I'm going to grab the screen back from you real quick here so we can talk about some next steps. All right, so for everyone out there today, again, thanks for being here on this very busy week. For some of you, I know it's a short week, so appreciate you taking the time. We would love to help you with a free security assessment, just an opportunity to take a look at what you are doing right now to protect your organization and maybe provide some guidance and insight on how you can strengthen that. And we can happily bring in Trustwave to help with that, or really look at any aspect of your organization, your systems, your infrastructure, and really help you figure out where you can improve your overall security posture. So please reach out to us. You can reach us by email at info@incidentinfo.com. Please give us a call. The number that is there on your screen. You can visit our website. So we'd love to help you with your next steps with regard to your security strategy. Again, for those of you here with us today, thank you so much. You will be entered in to win this Amazon gift card, and we're going to choose our winner at the end of tomorrow's presentation. And speaking of tomorrow, please do come back. Same time tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to continue our conversation with another industry leader, Appgate, who's going to talk more from an infrastructure standpoint and why a zero trust strategy is so important. So with that, I'm going to say thank you to everybody, and a very big thank you to Steve Baer of Trustwave. I really do appreciate your time and your expertise today. And I'll wish everybody in our audience a fabulous rest of your day. Thanks again. Bye-bye.